So today we're going to talk about something wild. We're going to dissect this strange, almost brutal management philosophy that took Nvidia from pretty much the brink of bankruptcy to, well, a multi-trillion-dollar giant right at the heart of the AI revolution. And get this, it's a story that says greatness isn't found in comfort, but it's forged in deliberate, calculated suffering. And it all started with a childhood mistake that, you're not going to believe this, sent its future CEO to a reform school instead of a prep school. All right, let's just jump right into the deep end with this one. I want you to picture this. You're a student at Stanford, one of the most elite universities on the planet, and the CEO of one of the world's biggest tech companies gets up on stage and wishes you ample doses of pain and suffering. I mean, seriously, he's not wishing you success or luck or happiness. He's literally wishing you pain. It's so jarring, right? So counterintuitive. And that right there is the absolute core of everything we're about to unpack. So what is going on here? That's the big question, right? Is this guy just trying to be provocative to get a headline? Or is this actually a super precise management theory, one that's been built from decades of the company almost dying? Well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to trace this whole idea back to where it all began, to figure out how a philosophy of, well, agony built the engine of our modern world. All right, Section 1, Forged in the Crucible. From a Kentucky reform school to a bullet-riddled diner. To really get Nvidia, you first have to get the man behind it, Jensen Huang. And to understand his, let's call it an obsession with suffering, we've got to go way back, way before Nvidia was even a thought. It all starts with this crazy mix-up that basically shaped his entire life. Okay, so check out this contrast. On the one hand, you have the expectation. When 9-year-old Jensen Huang came to America from Taiwan, his relatives thought they were sending him to this prestigious U.S. boarding school, the classic immigrant dream. But the reality? Well, because of a misunderstanding, a language barrier, he ended up at the Oneida Baptist Institute. And this wasn't some fancy prep school. No, it was a religious reform school for troubled kids in the middle of rural Kentucky. I mean, the expectation of privilege just slammed right into the harsh reality of a place for kids who'd been basically forgotten. And the lessons he learned there, they weren't from any textbook. They were about survival. Right away, he gets assigned to sanitation detail. That means cleaning the dorms and toilets every single day. But instead of being ashamed, he decided, you know what? I'm going to be the best toilet cleaner this place has ever seen. He made it his domain of excellence. Then there's his roommate, a 17-year-old covered in knife scars who is illiterate. So Jensen strikes a deal. He says, I'll teach you how to read if you teach me how to bench press and how to survive in here. It was this raw, street-level deal-making, forged in a place where your character was literally the only thing you had. So let's fast forward from that personal crucible to the corporate one. The origin story of Nvidia, it doesn't happen in some sleek Silicon Valley office. Nope. It happens at a Denny's. And we're not talking about a nice suburban Denny's. This was in a rough part of San Jose, a place known for cheap coffee and, get this, a front window pocked with bullet holes. Yeah, actual bullet holes. It's like the place itself was a metaphor for where they were starting out. Totally exposed, vulnerable, and with a very real chance of getting shot down. What a fitting start for a company that would always seem to live right on the edge of disaster. Okay, Section 2, The Honesty of Failure. Subtitle, The Near-Death Experience That Defined a Culture. So you've got this guy whose character was forged in hardship, and this company born in chaos. They were basically primed for their first huge test, and boy, was it a test. They were about to face a failure so catastrophic, so absolute, that it almost wiped them off the map before they'd even really begun. This is where that whole philosophy of suffering stops being a theory and gets brutally real. So Nvidia's very first chip, the NV1, was built on this massive technological gamble. At the time, everyone in 3D graphics was using triangles, polygons to build images. But Nvidia thought, that's clunky. We've got a better way. They decided to bet on using curved surfaces called quads because they believed it was a more elegant, computationally superior way to do things. This wasn't just a small bet either. They literally bet the entire company that their quad approach was the future. And they were catastrophically wrong. I mean, totally, completely wrong. Because while Nvidia was busy perfecting their beautiful quad technology, a little company called Microsoft was building something called DirectX. And DirectX would become the standard for all PC graphics. And guess what Microsoft chose? They chose triangles. Just like that, overnight, Nvidia's brilliant tech was completely obsolete. It was like they built the world's best Betamax player right as VHS took over. It was basically an extinction-level event for them. The NV1 chip was totally useless, and the company just imploded. They had to lay off almost everyone, going from over 100 employees down to just 30. They were this close to just vanishing. And this is the moment that becomes the stuff of Silicon Valley legend. Nvidia has one single lifeline left. It's a contract with Sega to build the graphics chip for their new console. But here's the problem. That chip is also based on their now dead quad technology. Jensen Huang knows it's a dead end. He knows it will fail. So what does he do? He flies to Tokyo. He sits down with the president of Sega, and he just confesses. He says, my technology is wrong. It will not work for your console. You should probably use a competitor's chip to make sure your product succeeds. And then, and this is the craziest part, he says, but I need you to pay us the full contract amount anyway, because if you don't, my company will go bankrupt. He basically fired himself but asked for severance. Now, by any normal business logic, Jensen should have been laughed out of the room, right? But the president of Sega, Shoichiro Aramajiri, was just stunned. He was blown away by this level of what he called intellectual honesty. Think about it, the guts to admit your entire strategy is a failure, without any ego, just to do the right thing for your client. He saw the character in that move, to kill your own baby to save your partners. And so he did something absolutely unthinkable. He went back to his board and convinced Sega to invest $5 million into this tiny, failing company. It wasn't a payment for a chip anymore. It was an investment in character. And that $5 million bucks, that was the lifeline that saved Nvidia. And this is where you can really start to see the pattern forming, right? It's getting baked right into the company's DNA. Look at this. You have the NV1 failure, which was just total market rejection. The response? Intellectual honesty. Then you have the Sega contract situation facing inevitable bankruptcy. The response? Radical vulnerability. Time and again, every single moment of extreme pain was met with this radical, strategic response. They didn't hide from failure, they ran towards it. This became their playbook. Face the pain, be brutally honest about it, and somehow find a way to turn it into an advantage. Up next, Section 3, the $0 billion bet. Manufacturing visionaries suffering for a decade. Okay, so now we see how this whole idea builds. Because after surviving all those early crises, you'd think Nvidia would play it safe, right? Nope. Instead, they started to deliberately inflict pain on themselves to chase this long-term vision. A vision so far out there that Wall Street literally thought they were insane. This is the moment where suffering stops being a reaction and becomes a core strategy. Okay, so back in 2006, Jensen Huang gets this idea. He thinks, hey, what if our graphics chips, the ones we use for video games, could be used for, like, general scientific computing? It was a cool idea. So to make it happen, they created a whole software platform called CUDA. But here's the absolutely crazy decision they made. They decided to include the special hardware needed for CUDA on every single chip they sold. And what was the market size for this incredible new feature? Exactly zero. A big fat $0. Nobody was asking for this. The market for it just didn't exist. I mean, this decision was basically financial suicide. It made their gaming chips way more expensive to produce, which completely crushed their profit margins. But they couldn't charge gamers more because, well, gamers didn't care at all about this CUDA thing. For almost a decade, Wall Street just hammered them for it. Their stock was punished. Analysts called it their valley of death. It was a period of totally self-inflicted suffering where the market was screaming at them every single day, telling them they were idiots. Just imagine the pressure to give up, to just cut their losses. But they didn't. They held the line. And then it happened. Vindication. In 2012, a huge breakthrough in AI called AlexNet changed everything. And what did the researchers use to train it? They used Nvidia GPUs, specifically because of that CUDA platform that Nvidia had been painfully building in the dark for a decade. That was it. That was the spark that lit the AI boom. And because Nvidia had gone through all that suffering, building out this ecosystem when nobody else cared, they were the only ones ready for it. It's like they spent 10 years building a railroad to a city that didn't even exist yet, and then suddenly, everyone wanted to move there. And that's the whole point, you see. This absolutely staggering $3 trillion valuation, it's not some accident. It wasn't luck. It is the direct financial result of that insane decade-long bet. It's the ultimate payoff for a period of immense, calculated, and visionary pain. It is literally the return on an investment in suffering. And that brings us to our final section, number 4, the glee of suffering, why character is formed from pain, not privilege. This brings us all the way back to where we started, that crazy speech at Stanford. But now, right, now that we have all this context, we can finally understand what he really meant. It wasn't just him being provocative. It was his entire life's philosophy, his company's entire history, all boiled down into one core idea. So the first pillar of this whole theory is something we already saw in action back in that Sega meeting: intellectual honesty. At Nvidia, this basically means you have to have zero ego attached to your ideas. It's having the guts to stand up and say, you know, this thing we've all poured our lives into for the last year, it's failing, it's wrong. And you have to do it right away, without hiding, so you can pivot and find the real solution. It's all about putting the truth way ahead of your own feelings. And this right here, this quote gets to the very heart of why he said what he said to those Stanford students. He believes that people with really high expectations, people who've always succeeded, always gotten the A's, always gotten into the best schools, actually have very low resilience. He thinks that life of constant success makes you fragile. It stops you from building up the calluses, the emotional scar tissue that you absolutely need to survive real failure in the real world. For him, greatness requires resilience, and resilience is like a muscle. It only gets stronger when you tear it down through pain. And inside Nvidia, this isn't just a theory. It's a whole culture with its own language. They have phrases like eat bitter, which means to just endure hardship without complaining. Ideas are put through a process they call torture to greatness, where they're relentlessly picked apart to make them better. And most famously, Jensen often starts meetings by telling everyone, our company is 30 days from going out of business. It's a mantra born from those early days designed to create a permanent state of what you might call productive paranoia. And Nvidia, pain isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's woven right into the fabric of the company. So let's just end on this thought. What the whole Nvidia story really seems to be telling us is that the biggest risks in our lives aren't the hard things we try to do. It's the uncomfortable things we actively try to avoid. That pain and suffering Jensen Huang wished for those students, maybe in the end it was really a wish for them to experience reality, a wish for them to earn the scars that prove they were actually in the fight. So the question I want to leave you with is this. What suffering, what necessary hardship are you designing your life to avoid? Because according to this whole architecture of agony, that might be the very thing you need the most.